Hey everybody, welcome to Badge Banter, where we feature some awesome stories from people throughout the security industry and discuss the importance of the ID badge and how it helps organizations better recognize and connect people. I'm Lindsay Martinez from Badge Pass. I'm super excited to introduce you to our guest today, Colin DePree, the head of sales strategy for North America for Salto Systems. Colin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Pleasure. Happy to be here and excited for the conversation.
Well, we only had to reschedule like twice because I was sick this week. So I appreciate you hopping on with me today. And I love every time I get a chance to talk with you. And Colin and I have had some great opportunities to share our thoughts together on panels throughout the industry. And honestly, every time I get together with Colin, I love it because he always tells me something awesome. So I'm sure today will be no exception to
We'll,
that.
we'll see what I can do. We'll see what I
Yeah.
can.
We'll see what you pull out of your hat today.
Yeah.
Um, but Colin, you've been in the security industry for a while now, kind of like me, and I'm starting to feel like my 15 years in the industry is a very long time, and I'm getting really old. But anyway, since you and I both started, and since the beginning of your career, there's definitely been some big changes in the security industry. So when you think about security industry as a whole, what are you most excited about where it's heading over the next few years?
I think what's interesting is what I'm most excited about in the security industry is the expansion beyond security, and that security has really become the foundational, the expectation aspect. But we've moved so far beyond just that into experiential situations. And one of the things that I always say is I would love to eliminate the control aspect from access control and really focus on the access part. And how do we access more? One of the things that I always say when I started in the security industry, um, if an if a lock failed secure, that was success. And that shouldn't be the definition of success, that it's just about how did we lock down, but how do we create openness? How do we create access instead of controlling access? And so I think that's a foundational transition that we're in that I'm most excited about. That security is about keeping it secure while opening it up. We want to be an open place, but a secure place. And I think that's a transition that we're starting to see that I'm super excited about.
I love that. I've actually never heard you say that before. And like I've heard Leo Ness talks a lot about like this is about more than keeping the bad guys out. But the way you just articulated, like I'd rather not have it be about control and have it be about access is super on point. And to me, like I get really excited about like how many new players and new discussion topics there are in the industry too. Like as part of what you're saying, it's very different than the landscape of 15 years ago. I felt like it was just a handful of the same companies that you saw all the time and the big guys. And now there's like all these new platforms and software driven applications as opposed to mostly just hardware driven. And it totally changes the narrative to more like what you're saying. How do we create an experience for our customers and how do we create openness and be able to share information across systems?
100%. I mean, that's one of the things that draws me to Salto is really looking at it from an access perspective and how do we inspire access and create more access, and that concept of openness is I think a better perspective in how to approach the access world instead of how do we control access. So it creates so much more opportunity to impact people instead of just keeping the bad guys out, as Lee says. But we can create access to more opportunities, access to more places, go beyond the door. There's a lot more you can do with it when you have an open mindset instead of that controlled, closed mindset.
I love that. That's so awesome. So I think that segues well to beyond the door. So clearly, when we think about the security industry, like at Badge Pass, we're coming at it from a very different approach, not like a door first or a hardware first approach. We're coming at it from a credential first approach and really focused around people's identity and who they are and creating a better experience there. And so I've been pretty vocal about like changes in the industry and how it's been really positive in enabling more conversations about credential issuance. the conversation at all about mobile credentials has enabled us to have good conversations about what that process looks like and what that experience is for customers on both the physical and the mobile credential side. So even talking about that in and of itself is a shift, in my opinion. But for you, like, what do you think has been one of the biggest shifts over the years and how organizations are viewing ID badges and that process as a whole?
Uh, there's a number of different ways I can go with this. And I think for me, the biggest topic in that conversation is almost a semantics one about the term credential and the term badge. And really we used to focus on those two terms again about how do I get access or entry into a facility. And the reality is we're moving away from a credential and a badge to what you said, identity, and a lot more around verification of identity. And that verification can come in a number of different ways, whether that is just, should you be in this place or should you not be in this place? Do you have access to this place? Do you not have access to this place? And I think as an industry, we are still struggling to make that transition to identity as opposed to a physical object, right? Mm-hmm. Even when we talk about mobile credential or physical credential, that's an object in my mind. And really that's not what the core of the ID badge was about. It was about verifying that individual's identity. And so that aspect of our industry isn't going anywhere. How we verify, trust, authenticate, however you want to name it, trust, authentication, those are terms you hear synonymous with computer and access to your machine and all of that. And in our world, we say it's a credential. I don't care whether it's mobile or physical or any of that. What we're trying to do is verify, authenticate, and know if we can trust that person. And so, to me, the core of it is really what's at heart. And you're starting to see that transition to where everything is about identity. Where is that identity in this process?
Yep, I love that. It's a great shift because it almost needs to be separate from the door access. Like that's just a component of what someone's going to do with that. That credential is kind of like a token of like who I am as a person. So I may use it to open a door, sure. And that's how the security industry has typically approached it. But I also might use it to sign on my PC in the morning. And I might use it to validate that I can come pick up a student at school, whatever it might be. There's so many different methods of validation and tracking outside of like, yeah, this card opens a door.
Exactly. And again, it's not about the card, right? There's too much emphasis on the physical component of it, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's a issued credential or an emailed mobile credential, we're accomplishing those same things. And it's about how are you what's that identifier? What is that token? And the more important piece is how secure is that token or whatever it is that we're using, right? It's not necessarily about how you're presenting it, where you're presenting it, whether you have to dual authenticate. No, at the core, we're trying to make sure that the person who's there is who they say they are, and that we're verifying and authenticating that component. I think there's too much emphasis on mobile first. Like, it's an and conversation. It is not an or conversation, and it never will be an or conversation, in my opinion.
So, shifting gears a little bit outside of industry talk, although we could probably have continued on that talk track for hours. One of my favorite things to talk with you in particular about is just leadership in general. In your approach to building a team at Salto, or really any organization that you've been a part of. So I always get really inspired by some of your thoughts around this, and I think that you and I have a lot of synergy in how we think about this in particular. But when you think about your career, what's one of like the toughest leadership moments that you feel like you've had to navigate, and like what did it teach you about leading in general?
Leadership is I love this conversation, right? And so many different forms of leadership and adaptability as a leader is something I'm super passionate about. So I agree. I love the opportunity for connection with other leaders to learn and grow in that aspect. For me, I think a lot of it stems from what got us here won't get us there, right? A core tenet in how I approach things. And the nature of that means you're going to have to make hard decisions that impact people you care about. That's a Kirby Smart quote. So for the Mississippi folks, I apologize, but that's something that Kirby references all the time. Of you're going to make tough decisions that impact people you care about, and as you're going through the process of what got us here won't get us there, you have to be willing to make hard decisions. And the key for me, though, is what used to be a difficult thing, and it still is difficult, right? If that ever becomes easy, you've got bigger problems and you shouldn't be in leadership, right? But it's become a passion of mine because of the importance of building and developing the why behind those decisions and making sure that you are extremely clear in your why in making those decisions, how you communicate those decisions. And what I've been fortunate to participate in is I've had the opportunity to make those decisions when things were already successful, which adds a little bit of a nuance to it, right? Like when things aren't going well, it becomes easy to make a change.
Mm-hmm.
When things are going well, it's a lot harder to make those changes.
Yeah.
And so you have to be a lot more crisp in your why. You have to go and do the research. You have to be prepared. And so, for me, from what's the hardest thing I've had to do is do some of those. What got us here won't get us there, even when things were going.
I think that that's really insightful. It's cool to hear you say that. I mean, everybody talks about change, and you're right. Like change is difficult. It's more difficult for some people than others. Like I love it. You also like it. But the communication around why you're making a change makes sense. But absolutely spot on. Like people expect you to make changes when things aren't going well. Honestly, if you don't, like that's really problematic from a leadership perspective. But when things are good and then you're still changing things, it can cause your organization to be like, whoa, 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 whoa. But like everything's good. Why would we change? And you're right. If you don't get ahead of it and you're not constantly changing and evolving, then you get stagnant and stuck.
It is, when sales team members have hit their budget or their quota for, 5-6 quarters in a row, and you now want to change compensation or add some level of complexity to a sale or bring in a new solution, things are going well. What the old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You'll die, in my opinion. Like that is the epitome of coming down the other side of the life cycle of an organization as soon as you become complacent in that space. But I think too often leaders who try to make that change, on the inference of ladder, they've done the research, they've made the assumptions, they've done the work, and then they only communicate the top part that says, this is what we're doing. They never tell anybody about why they're doing it. Mm-hmm. And that's where the magic comes from, right? You have to communicate everything else that led to this decision and be open and transparent on, yes, I know it's going to negatively impact here or it's negatively going to impact there. But you have to see the bigger picture, right? So you have to paint where we're trying to go, and you have to tell openly why you came to that decision. And then ultimately, as a leader, you better be willing to own the outcome of that decision.
Yeah, so true. I love that. One of the things, I mean, I agree with a lot of your philosophies on leadership as a whole, but the other thing I love about talking with you is you're pretty big on like mentorship, and helping bring people along with you and inspiring people, especially like younger people in the industry, and getting them excited about things. So if someone fresh out of school came to you and said like, I really want to make an impact in the security industry, what kind of Colin wisdom would you pass down to them? Maybe something that you wish someone had told you when you were first starting out.
Okay. You'll hear this term from me quite often. It's actually not my term. I took it from a Harvard and a Yale professor. Coopetition. I come from a athletic sports background, played college basketball, coached college basketball. There was one winner and one loser, and I did not want to be the loser. But coming into the business world, it took me a little while to learn and understand it's not a zero-sum game. There is not one winner, there is not one loser. Multiple people can win. And you can partner with your competition. The beauty of the ecosystem has created opportunities for so many people to win together. And so the idea that you can compete and partner and be clear on some of those things and actually produce better outcomes than if you just try to go and be your own, by yourself, go it alone, try not to be the loser type of a deal. I wish I had understood and learned that faster in my career. I came out and guns blazing, competitive at all cost type of deal. And it took me a little while. I can still be competitive. There can still be fire. There can still be passion. But in the business world, it's not just one winner and one loser. And for the most part, the game never ends, right? So
Yes. Another week, another year, another challenge, another game. I'm with you. That also ties in well to what we were talking about at the beginning. Like, I think that companies in the industry as a whole could stand to learn that right now. And when you've got all these new platforms and new players and everything, there's more, or a need for more co-opetition, if you will, than ever before. This isn't like, oh, this is my turf and that's yours, and we don't play nice in the sandbox together. Like, those days are gone.
100%. And there's a whole. I could go on forever. We talk about panels and stuff like that. I did the co-opetition presentation, I think, at Accelerize in like 21 or 22, and I wish I could do it every single year. I love it, and it can be so impactful just to the mindset alone, right? Like, there's background on, there are GM parts in Ford cars. There are Ford parts in GM cars. Like, as a public, we see them as the two biggest competitors in that space, right? And they recognize there's a mutual respect that says, okay, if somebody does this really, really well, why would we not want to participate in that component?
Like how I really want Tesla's full self-driving to be in my vehicle. Vehicle for that matter, because it's so impressive. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Put that, in that model, right? Tesla sells more of that component. These people sell more of that car. That is not a zero-sum game. Like, that can work, vertical markets, vertical solutions, as we come back to the expansion of security into creating access instead of controlling access. The user experience in schools are different than in multifamily developments. Your solution may be better suited over here. A partner may be better suited over there. How do you leverage those two components as you change the journey, as you change the vertical market, all of those pieces? Again, if you have an open mind and you're willing to have those conversations, I think we all end up better on the backside.
I love it. So that's the lesson for all the newbies in the industry, and not the newbies, the people who've been here for a long time. Maybe it's a better lesson for the experienced people in the industry. Co-opetition, takeaway word from this. So, all right, another topic outside of leadership and mentorship and all that good stuff that you and I talk a lot about is like this concept of the balance between home and work. And balance is a questionable word. Uh, you could phrase it differently. I've heard you phrase it differently too. But obviously, like you and I are both like juggling high impact positions in an organization and a family and a young family too. What does like a typical day in that world look like for you? And how do you like kind of stay grounded in that when both work and home want Colin's full attention?
Yeah, it's tough, right? I mean, that's why I think you and I have connected so well on a few of these things, right? Hey, how do you do it? What's your trick, right? And it's different for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, one of the things that I try to use as my measuring stick, which people are going to argue this all over the place, right? Whether it's valid or not. But uh, uh, I say this somewhat tongue in cheek when I tell people, but I know I'm doing a reasonably well job when I travel more than my wife would like me to, but less than I probably should be to do my job perfectly.
That's fair.
And both sides could probably argue it both in both directions, right? If that's valid or not. Like, wait a
Yeah.
minute, how is this happening? But I say it that way, and if you really questioned me on it, the response is too often when we talk about the term sacrifice in business, the sacrifice is made at home way, way too often.
Yeah.
And we aren't willing to openly have a discussion around, hey, some sacrifices need to be made on both sides of the equation, or this is never going to work out.
I,
And
I get what you're saying there, and I like it. One thing that I think people struggle with in like this concept of balance is that it needs to be balanced all the time. So like on a weekly basis or monthly basis, like I'm doing this, and like there is no perfect recipe for this. And it can vary. See, like there can be seasons of it, and so I've had conversations with my husband about like this is a real aggressive time at
yeah,
Bachelor Support. Like the balance is going to be, I'm going to be on the road a lot more right now. Like I need to be doing this, and maybe it isn't balanced. So if someone was looking at it on a calendar or week by week, they'd be like, "You're doing too much here." And then I'll be like, "Well, that's what I need to be doing, and it's better for me and the company and my family. Like if I'm having success there." And then there may be another season where things have chilled out a little bit and like I'm able to be more present here. It doesn't mean that every week has to be this perfect 50-50 balance. Like that's unrealistic. Um,
totally.
and that's where I don't love the word balance.
Yeah, it's
Um,
not a scale, right? We're not putting home life on a scale and work life on a scale and in trying to make that balance out. No, I'm with you, and I even think it's not even necessarily a seasonality piece, right? One of the beautiful things from kind of the work from home concept that came out of COVID in my life was the recognition that I could choose some of my work hours, right? Again, it's not perfect for everybody.
mhm.
I found it to be extremely beneficial to, you know, I'll stop work at 3:30 when the kids are home, and I will pick back up at 8 o'clock when the kids are in bed.
Mhm.
Not every night, right? That's not healthy either.
Mhm.
But being able to shift and make some of those adjustments are critical components, right? Like if I'm going to be up from 8 to 10 anyways, why am I going to sacrifice those 2 hours by myself for the 2 hours from 3:30 to 5:30 when the kids are home and up and active and outside and take advantage of the ability while I'm home to do that because I spend a whole bunch of other times on airplanes where that opportunity isn't there, right? So it's absolutely about being able to adjust and shift and move, not just on the seasons, but even times a day.
Yep.
Is
No, I like that. Have you ever listened to? I was listening to a podcast this morning and they were talking about this. But have you ever listened to Alex Hermosi? I might be pronouncing his last name wrong, so he's not going to listen to this though. He's the CEO of acquisition.com. He's like aggressively controversial about like work life balance doesn't exist and you need to basically give everything to work and like 100%. And I think he takes this like polar opposite
yes.
extreme And sometimes, like, I'll go listen or read something he said or listen to something he said, like, as a kick in the butt, of like, no, you need to be more aggressive and be doing more in this. But man, like, you got to go check some of it out because it's like the polar opposite of what we're saying. Like, pour everything into work, and then you'll have the benefit of it in the long run, like 10 years from now. He's thinking of a season as like the future. We're thinking of seasons in smaller increments potentially in this conversation.
Well, but also, I mean, you talked about some of the mentorship stuff, right? I even think it's in seasonality of life.
Mm-hmm.
Do think that there is a component. My work life balance when I was 25 and no kids was very different. There was definitely no balance. It was far more work than
That's the perfect time for that.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So when I'm talking to the 23, 24, 25-year-old kids, I make that a point to say, hey, you have to recognize that this is an opportunity for you to make serious strides in your career, but don't ever allow that to be constant, right? Just like in business, you have ups and downs.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to hit that. One of the things that a coach that I have through Vistage talks about is you have to recognize there will be phases in your life that will be striving, and there will be phases in your life where you need to be thriving. And for really driven, motivating people, transition from something I struggled with, still struggle with, but 2 or 3 years ago, I really struggled with it. Making a transition from a striving mindset to a thriving mindset can be really difficult for motivated individuals, but it has to be there in order to keep sanity, in order to keep healthy relationships and those sorts of things. And I'm very against the striving at all costs, just nonstop piece.
Yeah.
So
But it may be perfect for some people. Some people may never be able to get out of that mindset, and it may be healthier for them to always be in striving mode. It's interesting. I love that perspective. So honestly, we could probably stay here for like 2 more hours and talk about it. I don't know that anyone would want to listen to us do that forever. But I have appreciated the thoughts that you've left me with today, and I'm sure everybody will take at least something away from what you said. So thank you for some of those ideas.
hopefully, like you said, there's different perspectives. This is just an opinion and a perspective. There's no
No,
right
wrong.
those things, right? So
Yep. Awesome. Well, we can't wrap without doing Badge Blitz. So it's one of my favorite segments. This is 60 seconds. I will set a timer and I will just hit you with some rapid fire questions that you could not have prepared yourself for because you don't know what they are. But these are easy. Go with your gut answers. Just supposed to be fun. So are you ready?
I guess no, I'm not ready, but I have to be, I guess. So
You're ready. You were born ready. All right. Go. What is one gadget you can't live without?
one gadget,
Mhm.
um, a phone, I guess. I mean, that's a pretty lame answer, but my phone is with me all the time. So
Mine's my remarkable, which I
uh,
learned from you.
I was gonna say, you must have gotten some good advice from somebody.
I did. If you could automate one daily task, what would it be?
Ooh, um, making coffee.
If you wrote a book, what would it be titled?
Wrote a book,
Yeah,
only available in Audible. I don't read.
you won't read a book. You'll just listen to one. What superpower do you wish you had?
Um, think before I speak. Which isn't a superpower, but
It would be for you.
yeah. Think about
What would you say is, I'm going to ask you this question anyway, even though the timer went off. What
yeah.
would you say is the most overused phrase in meetings or emails?
Oh, um, overused phrase. Oh,
This wasn't supposed to be hard.
I know, but I don't get too caught up in the corporate jargon, circle back, all of that sort of stuff.
I don't mean you use it.
Um,
All right. This
this-
wasn't a trick question.
yeah, I don't have a good answer for that. Sorry, bad answer here from me.
You either love them all or hate them all, and so therefore you don't use them at
Yeah,
all.
yeah, there. We'll go with that.
I like it. You're not worried about it. So perfect. Well, thanks for joining me today, Colin. It's been a pleasure having you. As always, it's fun to have conversations with you, and fun to have friends like you in the industry who have unique perspectives and different ideas to bring to the table. So I really appreciate you.
I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to join you and that you put yourself and your company out there to have these conversations is super refreshing and uh, makes me positive that we are moving the security industry in the right direction and that we're taking the control out of access control and just making it about open and creating more opportunities. So
Awesome.
appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate that, Colin. Thank you so much. And to everybody else, we hope you'll join us next time as we take you beyond the badge.